So, Bobby
Yo.
Mick Bobbington,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to look at this meme, which we've already done once.
Oh, is this a redo?
We got to redo
A
this
little
one.
too
It was
wasted the first
we
time
got
around.
so like usually
shit happens.
usually we have like sometimes we might have like a drink or two like when we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time like we should have called it a night. The podcast before. We should have called it a night after that one.
Mm-hmm.
But then we went upstairs, we drank a little more, and I'm like, fuck it, let's try to do another one.
Okay.
We shouldn't have done that.
No.
I was listening to it.
Not good.
I was listening to it, and I'm like, I can't stand how slow I'm talking. I can't stand how difficult it is for me to keep a train of thought. And then our responses back and forth, nothing was working because we were drunk, and that is not conducive to having a conversation.
No.
A little bit of drunk is good for
good for the comedy.
it opens the pipe ways. It also gets you to be more kind of fluid, when you're having a conversation and talking about things. But having a lot to drink, which we did that night, not good for recording. So
No, but we had a good time.
we had a great time. It was fantastic. I had a lot of fun.
It was a good rehearsal.
Yeah. We'll
This
call
should be
that.
like the perfect podcast because we've already done this one.
I honestly, I don't know how much we're going to remember from the last time, but I want
If we're doing the one I'm thinking about, I think I remember a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, some, yeah. I'm sure some of it's there. Like I didn't forget it happened, but anyway. So I want you to take a look at this meme and explain what it looks like and what is in the text on the meme.
All right, let's see. Good old top and bottom meme. All right, we got two pictures here. We got up at the top, there's a very angry looking lady. Who is this lady?
Well, I'm going to go over that, actually. It's
Okay,
going to be very brief about her.
Don't worry about the lady. Okay. It says, says, climate change is proven by science. Why can't you accept that? And at the bottom, we got the Fresh Prince saying, science proves there are two genders. Why can't you accept that? Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So that's
Starting off strong. All right.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Now, typically here on Naming List, we don't go over controversial subjects, but
Right.
This time we are.
Okay.
Usually we keep it pretty non-controversial.
Couldn't even finish the sentence.
I can't keep a straight face on that. I don't think we've talked about anything that doesn't have some kind of controversy involved.
Well, there's controversy everywhere. Somebody's always looking for a fight.
Somebody's going to be pissed off about something, and that's what's going to happen, and it's always been that way.
Yep.
And I know how people are like, well, people are so offended these days. It's like, people have always been fucking offended by something.
That's true.
There's always been somebody.
It's just easier to be offended now because you got social media and everybody can hear about it. So.
Well, it's easier to find the people who are offended now.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of times when some of these people are saying, "Oh, people are too easily offended today," what they really mean is it was easier to be racist in the past. When it's like, okay, how about you calm the fuck down?
Yeah.
Okay, stop focusing on chanty binks and focus on what the average person is actually like. Let's do first what we like to do when it comes to memes and talk about the person who the memer is using as a mascot. So at the top we have the villain, Elizabeth Warren.
Ooh.
Oh, yes. What an evil person. Elizabeth Warren talking about climate change being proven by science. My God. How could we? How could we end up in a place where somebody would say something so heinous? Anyway, essentially, we know her politics. She is a Democrat senator.
Okay.
And so really, whether or not she truly believes in climate change, which to me, she seems like she does, listening to her speak and everything. It seems like she does find it to be an issue that matters. She seems sincere to me when she talks about things like that. But even if she isn't, even if she's being insincere, she would have an incentive to push a climate change agenda, because it would help get her votes from the left as a Democrat. But the hero of our story here, Will Smith.
Oh, everybody's hero.
He's our right-wing hero. And so like we've had some experience in the past, in past episodes wherein turns out that the memer maybe chose a hero that doesn't quite fit their views.
Yeah.
For example, Gene Wilder.
There he is.
Yeah. Yeah. So Gene Wilder in the Willy Wonka memes is often used by right-wing people when it turns out that Gene Wilder was a huge Obama supporter, huge proponent of stem cell research and things like that, and so maybe not your best mascot.
No.
You know? Now, sadly, audience, you don't get to have my sincere reaction now to what Bobby said earlier, but she made a joke about Will Smith being Willy Wonka.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
It would be so fucking good.
It would. I would love that movie.
As soon as you said that, I lit up. I was elated. I was like, oh my God, that would be amazing. And also, if he does like the soundtrack too, you know,
it'd be good.
A Wild Wild West, Men in Black style Willy Wonka would be fantastic.
I would totally watch that movie.
Yes.
Probably multiple times.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. I think that would be great. Yeah. I would love to see that.
I feel like it would be hard to fuck it up.
Yeah.
Like you could go as campy as you want.
Yeah.
And it's still
campier
be fun.
The better, honestly.
Yeah,
I think it would be great.
Still be fun.
Yeah.
You know? I think there's a good potential here.
Yeah.
I love that idea. That would be just awesome.
Hollywood, are you listening? Do this.
And then what got onto
then I started laughing about Gene Wilder playing the Fresh Prince.
Yeah, you were giggling and I didn't know why.
Yeah, it popped into my head. Just picturing Gene Wilder giving Uncle Phil a hard time, just arguing with him about something.
I would watch that.
Wearing that inside out jacket for that fancy school.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about turning the jacket inside out. But
either one. As you know, Will Smith or Willy Wonka, I would watch them both, and I think they'd be great.
Yeah, but so Gene Wilder as the Fresh Prince, I don't think would work as well as Will Smith as Willy Wonka. I think Will Smith would make a much better Willy Wonka than Gene Wilder would have made a.
I'd watch them both. I would give them both a try, but I think you're right. I think the Willie's.
Yeah.
Willie Smith.
I think
Will Smith, Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
Would be much better.
But when it comes to Will Smith being the right wing anti woke mascot here. Let's kind of dig into a little bit of what Will Smith's politics are.
Okay.
Again, Will Smith's not somebody who you really think of when you think of politics.
Not really.
Yeah,
he's a Scientologist, right? Isn't he one of that group?
Technically, yes, and we're not going over that.
Okay.
I previewed this script to Brandy just to see what she thought of it, and she really liked it. And she goes, I thought you were going to get into his Scientology stuff. I'm like, that's a whole other beast. That's
a big topic.
It's not related to this so much. That is something else. And
I'm sure there's a few memes on Scientology. We can get back into that later.
Plus, there are memes about Will Smith that are going around right now.
Oh, really?
And there's a lot to dig into those. So we might get into it if we cover some of those.
Sure.
Because there is a lot of misinformation that's being spread right now. A lot of it's true. And then there's a lot of people who are trying to jump on the bandwagon, they're spreading nonsense. So we are likely to dig into some Will Smith territory beyond this. But what I was mostly interested in is Will Smith a good candidate for your right-wing meme? So is Will Smith a good candidate for a right-wing mascot? I'm
going to guess no.
We'll see. I mean, you never know.
Never met the guy.
You never know with people.
I don't know how he feels.
So, I have this quote from NBC News.
Mm-hmm.
He then went on, he referring to Will Smith.
Right.
He then went on to pointedly attack Trump's controversial Muslim ban proposal. Quote, as painful as it is to hear Donald Trump talk, and as embarrassing as it is as an American to hear him talk, I think it's good. We get to know who people are, and we get to cleanse it out of our country.
Okay.
Ooh, swing and a miss for the right wing using him as their mascot.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, let's read on though. Smith lamented that the Republican presidential candidate's rhetoric toward women had found a captive audience. Quote, for a man to be able to publicly refer to a woman as a fat pig makes me teary. And for people to applaud, that is absolutely fucking insanity to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know you fucked up if you got Will Smith swearing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If Will Smith
he's
is
pretty much against that.
if
right?
he's
Like,
saying cuss words,
yeah.
he is very strongly against you.
Yeah. He's made a point to mention that before. He doesn't like swearing. He doesn't think it's necessary.
He's pretty good about keeping it PC, you know,
Yeah.
or not PC, but kind of family friendly, sort of thing. So I'll continue this quote here. It says, my grandmother would have smacked my teeth out of my head if I had referred to a woman as a fat pig. I cannot understand how people can clap for that. It is absolutely collective insanity. If one of my sons, and then he pauses and says, I'm getting furious just thinking about it. If one of my sons said that in a public place, they couldn't even live in my house anymore.
Right.
Maybe not your right-wing mascot.
No, doesn't sound like it.
Maybe not the guy you're looking for here. So, but what's more important here is what are Smith's views on gender?
Mm-hmm.
So, did we forget that Jaden Smith, Will Smith's son, very publicly does not ascribe to stereotypical gender roles?
Really? Okay.
Yeah, no, not at all. I actually have a clip here from BBC Radio about Jaden's gender fluidity.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is not
reliable source.
Yeah, so this is not from Jaden Smith himself, but it's about Jaden Smith.
Okay.
Okay, now I want to talk about your family.
Yes.
Because your kids seem to have a lot of freedom of expression.
Yes.
Is that something that you consciously encourage them to have?
Yeah, I think it may have been a mistake. I think we may have gone too far.
So how do you respond then, for example, if you're encouraging them to have freedom of expression and then people start making jokes about, say, Jaden modeling women's clothes? How do you, as a dad, handle that?
You know, there's a really powerful internal quality as an artist that as parents we encourage. You got to get out on the edge. You have to try things. You have to be comfortable doing things that people don't agree with, and you have to be comfortable doing things that you could fail.
Yeah.
And Jaden is 100% fearless. He will do anything.
Definitely.
You know, so as a parent, it's scary. It's really terrifying, but he is completely willing to live and die by his own artistic decisions, and he just doesn't concern himself with what people think.
So, interesting quote there.
Mm-hmm.
So this meme has a picture of Will Smith shrugging his shoulders and saying the phrase that science proves there are two genders. But real life Will Smith seems to be more open-minded than that.
Yeah, definitely.
And he made the little joke. He's like, "Oh, that may have been a mistake," because just to be funny, but also to express the fact that he even even with the fact that it is scary to let your kids do things that might be maybe faced with some backlash by the general public, that's a terrifying thing to think about your kids doing that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he seems to be on the side of allowing them to,
Sure.
and to encourage them to not be afraid to do that kind of thing. Not only not your right-wing mascot, but also maybe not the two genders person you're looking for.
Doesn't sound like it, no.
Even if you're looking for the right-wing thing. And I have a quote from Will Smith talking to BET. He said, "The greatest gift I can give my children is the freedom to be who they are. I feel like a lot of times when I was growing up, I would see parents force a child to be what you want them to be. As a parent, if it's an oak tree, I want it to grow as an oak tree. I'm not going to force it to be an apple tree. Jada and I are very serious about finding what they are and encouraging them to be what they are, because you can never be happy trying to be what you're not. We encourage our kids to experiment and seek who they are more than who we want them to be." Now, I can already hear some backlash to this comment. People saying, quote, "If it's an oak tree, then that means that a human with a dick and balls must be male," and it's blah, 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 that kind of thing. But that's the opposite of what Will Smith is saying here.
Yeah.
He is saying that he's explaining that as you grow up, you discover yourself, and if you find out that you are a certain way, it would be wrong for him as a parent to force it otherwise. So, the tree metaphor refers to who his kids discover they are, not what genitals they were born with.
Yeah.
Like their genitals don't have shit to do with it. It's who they discover they are. So, one thing that makes me think here is that the quip that is provided is that the top part says that climate change is proven by science. Why can't you accept that? And the bottom part says that science proves that there are two genders. Why can't you accept that? What I wonder here, though, is if they're taking these phrases at face value, does that mean that the memer has to accept climate change? Or do they mean that both are not true? I know what their point is,
Yeah.
but they're not making it well.
No, not really. No.
This is bad delivery, is what this is.
Yeah.
It's a poorly made meme, honestly.
Well, most of them are.
Yeah. The top part, says that science, quote, proves climate change, and the bottom part says that science proves two genders. What I wanted to address here first is the word prove or proven that are used in this meme. At the top, Elizabeth Warren is saying that climate change is proven by science. At the bottom, Will Smith is saying that two genders is proven by science. Science doesn't actually prove anything.
Right.
Essentially, as a scientist, you look at the world, come up with a hypothesis based on what you have observed, and then you gather evidence using the scientific method. And that evidence either supports or does not support your hypothesis. Then, if you can show enough evidential support for your hypothesis, it becomes a theory. You haven't necessarily proven anything, but you use evidence to eliminate or diminish reasonable doubt. And even then, there's always a possibility you turn out to be wrong.
Yeah.
There might be a tertiary factor you haven't considered, So the whole I know this sounds nitpicky, but the truth to me matters and science matters. And the people who think that science proves anything shows that they don't really have a grasp on what science is. And it kind of drives me nuts. And I understand that colloquially we can use the word proven to mean certain things, but even in court, they have to have that caveat of beyond a reasonable doubt, because you can never prove anything 100%. But you can eliminate most reasonable doubt. out. And that's what science does. So I get a little irritated when I hear the phrase proven by science, because it definitely did not come from a scientist.
Right.
You know, when people put that kind of thing. So let's move on to another word that is not used properly here, and that word is gender. When this meme uses the word gender, it almost certainly is referring to a person's sex, which is not what gender is. But a lot of these, quote, anti-woke memes treat gender and sex like they are the same thing. Sometimes it is intentional, you know, to get a rise out of people, but often it appears to come from a place of misconception. Very briefly, the difference between sex and gender is that sex refers to a biological disposition, while gender refers to the social construct that we apply to a person's sex. Now, this concept gets some pushback from people, largely because ubiquity is often mistaken for science. You look around and for the most part, if you're the people you're surrounded by, especially in certain groups and certain neighborhoods and certain atmospheres, the boys seem to act like boys and the girls act like girls, and therefore science. But this ignores the fact that the world is actually more complex than your anecdotal experiences. So from the book Dragons of Eden by Carl Sagan, he wrote that as an American, it would be difficult to base just on personal experience to accept the fact that 1 in 5 people on the planet are Chinese. And he wrote this seemingly facetiously, said, quote, "Well, that's impossible. I know lots of people, and hardly any of them are Chinese."
Yeah, but you're not in China.
Exactly, and that's the point. You know, it's like just because your worldview involves something that seems completely ubiquitous, it doesn't mean that it actually is. So when it comes to something as pervasive and consistent as gender, our world experience makes it difficult to truly understand it. So I'm going to read from a journal called the Inequality Reader.
Sure.
Talking about gender for most people is the equivalent of a fish talking about water. Gender is so much the routine ground of everyday activities that questioning its taken for granted assumptions and presumptions is like thinking about whether the sun will come up. Gender is so pervasive that in our society, we assume that it's bred into our genes. Most people find it hard to believe that gender is constantly created and recreated out of human interaction, out of social life, and is the texture and order of that social life. Yet gender, like culture, is a human production that depends on everyone constantly doing gender. So, this phrase "doing gender" is actually quoted from another source, which essentially means that we are actively creating gender as we go. To continue with this journal, gender is such a familiar part of daily life that it usually takes a deliberate disruption of our expectations of how women and men are supposed to act to pay attention to how it is produced. Gender signs and signals are so ubiquitous that we usually fail to note them unless they are missing or ambiguous. Then we are uncomfortable until we have successfully placed the other person in a gender status. Otherwise, we feel socially dislocated.
Okay.
I think that makes a good point. It's kind of like a you can't see the forest for the trees sort of situation. Like we're so consistently under the assumption that gender is just a given thing, just because it's common,
Right.
Rather than taking into account the fact that not everybody's going to fit in these presumptions,
Right.
It's like the 1 in 5 people are Chinese thing. If you only go by your personal experience, you're not going to think there are that many Chinese people, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally know very many,
Yeah, exactly.
but
you know?
I'm not in China, so
Yeah.
China is a very densely populated
And when
place. So
when I
it's
lived in
little different.
when I lived in China,
Yeah, you were
there
probably surrounded by them.
I didn't see hardly any white people. So.
Yeah, exactly.
And I rarely saw a black person. That was,
Oh yeah,
both were rare. White people, black people. I didn't see anybody
Mm-hmm.
like that. It was everybody was Asian.
sure.
And
Well, that makes sense.
And in fact,
Most people in America are American. I mean, it just depends
Yeah.
on where you're at.
yeah, and some of the Americans that went with me, they came up with a term because it started to feel weird to refer to somebody as an Asian person when
Mhm.
everybody you meet is Asian.
Right.
So what they did instead is instead of referring to, there's a white person or there's a black person or there's an Indian person or whatever,
Mhm.
they just called them all are-nots because they are not Asian.
Nice. Yeah,
That's-
I mean yeah.
that was the ubiquity of meeting Asian people when you're
Sure.
living in China,
Yeah.
and we lived there for a while, and it was like you it's like you're a fish in different water,
Sure.
and it kind of brings a perspective to light that like, man, there are parts of the world that are very different,
Yeah.
Um,
It would be nice if everybody could spend time in a different country,
yeah, or
just to see what it's like,
or like also with different types of people,
Yeah. Yeah, get outside your comfort zone just to see what it's like, meet new people, go somewhere else,
And I think like prejudices like these, that's where it comes from. Like you haven't met trans people, or you have but haven't realized it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you've met one, and like because the TV told you that that's a problem somehow. You've dismissed those people as people.
Yeah.
And so I think having more exposure to diversity would be very good for people, especially people
absolutely.
who are
Yeah.
sharing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we all need to get outside our comfort zone a little bit. Just try it out. People are people. Everybody needs a little bit of respect. Just go somewhere and try it out. See what you think.
Now,
Don't be a dick about it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Don't be a fucking dick about it.
Yeah.
Like just take in the experience.
Yeah.
Take some time to experience diversity,
Yeah,
and
try it out.
and you're going to realize it's not as scary as
No.
as these crappy 24-hour news cycles make you
Yeah.
think.
If it's not for you, it's not for you. That's fine. But at least you've tried it and you see what
and
the
you can
different
at least,
people are
you'll-
different.
Yeah, and you're going to learn that they're human beings.
Yeah.
And that's another thing.
Yeah.
So one thing I do want to address here
Hmm.
is that even though they misuse the word proven,
Mm-hmm.
which again colloquially we can throw that around, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to get into the science of this.
Okay.
And we are going to start with gender, and then we're going to move on to sex. Or we'll talk about
Woo.
sex. We're going to talk about sex, okay? So, so anyway, gender, being a social construct, first means that it is not automatically or necessarily dichotomous.
Mhm.
A social construct is defined by people. Essentially, if people start to observe more than two types of gender, then strictly and scientifically, whether you like it or not, speaking, there are more than two genders.
Right.
So, what is a construct? First off, so we'll get into the two genders because like everybody's like, well, everybody's there's a male and there's a female, and you're going to be one, and I don't social construct, and that's a
Yeah.
liberal talking point. And what no, it's literally science.
Yeah.
Like science has shown that there's sex.
Mhm.
And then there's gender.
Right.
They're
yeah.
two different things. And gender refers to something completely different, which we are going to get into, and we're going to get into the science of that. But first, I kind of want to explain what a social construct is because there seems to be a lot of confusion here.
Okay.
And something that drives me absolutely fucking nuts. Now, again, disclosure for the millionth time, I'm a left-leaning person, but people on the left also don't seem to understand what a fucking social construct is.
It's confusing. There's a lot going on there.
But the thing is, like, this part doesn't have much nuance to it.
Okay.
The left-wing people have been sharing this crap of saying that sex is a social construct, and it's not. Sex refers to your we're getting to that. I don't know. I'm getting frustrated and ahead of myself, but I will say left-wing people fuck this up all the time when it comes to the actual science.
Yeah.
And that just gives more fuel to the right-wing people who want to pretend that everybody's male or female, period, and that's it. And they want to think that gender and sex is the same thing. And then when a left-wing person can't even understand the science themselves, it just adds more fuel to their fire. And it infuriates me. Anyway, so what is a social construct? Basically is a way for us to, as human beings, to simplify things and to categorize the world. Some examples of social constructs are like social cliques, like being gothic, emo, or like we have social constructs for different types of professions. For example, we have a certain idea of how we expect somebody who is a nurse to behave.
Right.
And that construct can change. Someone with no experience with nurses may assume that they're all caregiving type of people. And when you meet an individual, that might be true. But somebody who has only had bad experiences with nurses may have the opposite feeling. And when they meet a new nurse, they may be assuming a bad experience with that person based on their construct of what a nurse is.
Yeah, they could be like that nurse from Misery. Wasn't what was her name? Kathy Bates? Didn't she play? Well, she was a nurse, right? She was pretty fucking awful.
She was so terrifying.
She was.
Yeah,
that was scary.
She's because of that movie.
She was a nurse.
I don't remember if she was a nurse. I don't remember what her profession is.
I'm pretty sure she was a nurse.
All I remember was she was obsessed with his book, and
yeah.
I will say, because of her performance in that role, she's been my favorite actress since I was a little kid.
She is so good. She can play
wildly
so many
talented.
different parts.
She's wildly talented.
She was scary in that movie. But yeah, she played. I'm pretty sure she was a nurse in that movie, and she was scary as shit.
Yeah. And you can imagine how a social construct applied to what a nurse is, or who a nurse is, or who we expect them to be, could, like, not only is it socially constructed, but it can be different from different perspectives.
Right.
And sometimes, even if we had positive assumptions, like say if everybody thought nurses were good caregivers, or something like that, sometimes positive assumptions like that can be a problem as well, such as assuming that all Asians are good at math. Like we all think, like, say if we all thought that Asians were studious and great at math and very smart and all that stuff, all you would have to do is put yourself in the shoes of an Asian person who is horrible at math to realize where that would be a problematic issue. How shitty would it feel to be an Asian person who's bad at math and everyone assumes you're good at it?
Yeah.
And you live life not looking forward to the moment that a person finds out you're bad at math. Right. Like it's so like even positive assumptions, because like, and also it's like as an Asian person who's bad at math, like if you're an Asian person who's bad at math, it's like, I'm not just math,
Yeah.
Like I'm a human being, and I'm as complex, like we're as complex and as diverse as anybody else. And like having this social construct applied to me is problematic, even though it sounds like a positive thing.
Right. On the plus side though, what if you were an Asian race car driver?
There. We did well, yeah. I mean, like adding these social constructs to people, it's not always a bad thing to use social constructs because our brains don't have the energy and we don't have the time to fully understand everybody as an individual. So social constructs have probably come as an evolutionary heritage, like that we that was necessary to our survival at some point, rather than sitting there like, oh, there's a lion, but is he like these other lions? It's like, no, I had a terrifying experience with a lion, and I'm not going to be near that lion again.
Well, that's just good survival instincts.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't fuck with a lion.
but the thing is that the assumptions about a lion's behavior is a social construct.
Yeah.
Whereas being a lion is not a social construct. Like, lions are lions,
Right.
but the way that we assume the danger in them is probably rooted in where social constructs have come from,
Okay.
That type of thing. Like, at some point, creating social constructs was probably important for our survival.
But I mean, we all need a little more diversity in our lives. Because I haven't. I don't know how to word this properly. I grew up in a white neighborhood. I didn't. There weren't any black people until I got into like high school. There were very few Hispanic people, and I wish it had been a little more diversified because I didn't get that experience. I don't know what it's like to be not white.
Yeah.
So I think we all need more of that.
That's one thing too. I think that there would be a lot less opposition to other types of people if the general population were exposed to each other more frequently.
We need to mix around a little bit more. We need more. I don't know what the word for it is. We need more diversity.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, we do. It's
more mixing up.
Yeah, yeah. People need more experience with each other. Obviously, that is one reason why we need to be careful with social constructs. Being black or Asian is not a social construct, but the blanket assumptions that we ascribe to them are.
Yeah.
And when we do this, we make assumptions that aren't true a lot of the time. So let's kind of look at how this affects people in terms of regarding gender. I'll start by asking you a couple of questions. Have you ever met a feminine man?
Sure, yeah.
Have you ever met a masculine woman?
Yeah.
If sex automatically determined gender, we wouldn't expect to see a diversity or variation in masculinity or femininity among members of the different sexes. I have known people who are very androgynous, for example, and when others would meet them, suddenly they didn't know how to act around them because they feel like men and women need to be treated differently and get stressed when they can't funnel them into a social construct that they're used to. There's nothing inherently wrong with social constructs, but it can lead to problems, and I think that we rely on them a little too much.
Yeah.
There have been countless times where I've met women who end up being, quote, one of the guys, even more than I am. And I've met men who fit in way better with women.
Yeah.
So social constructs can help us categorize the world rather than trying to get to know every individual thoroughly, because that would be nearly impossible. But we need to be prepared to find that our construct doesn't apply to everyone. We have people who are gender neutral, for example. I have a friend who goes by they, them pronouns, and they're not easily offended by being misgendered because they seem to understand that conversationally it is difficult for some people to stick with they, them pronouns.
Yeah, I have trouble with the pronouns. I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's confusing for me, and sometimes I say the wrong word, and I hope nobody ever gets upset by it because I'm a doofus, but
Well, and nearly everybody who identifies with these pronouns they're going to be understandable, and they're going to come from a place of, these are the pronouns I prefer, and if you are not coming from an intentionally if you're not intentionally coming off from a place of animosity, it's unlikely people are going to be, wildly offended.
Right.
Despite what the viral videos online are going to say. Like, if that were a common thing that happened all the time, the videos wouldn't be viral. We would all just be like, yeah, I see that shit all the time. But the reason why these things go viral is because of how ridiculous and absurd they seem, you know? And they wouldn't seem ridiculous and absurd if it actually happened with any type of commonality, like it or any frequency whatsoever. I would like to get to a point where gender neutral pronouns are easier for people to use naturally.
Mhm.
Now, I do have a rant a bit about gender pronouns.
Okay.
This has been important to me since like 8th grade. First off, why do we have gendered pronouns in the first place? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Why based on genitals? Why is it that I would call you she and me he because I have a fucking dick? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like,
No.
in terms of language, what is the point in that?
I don't know. It's just because it's what we know. You know, we've been raised to boys are he and girls are she, and that's the way it is.
Well, see, that's the whole like fish talking about water thing.
Yeah,
you know, like we're just so used to it.
Right.
Like Chinese, the Chinese language does not have gendered pronouns. Although in written Chinese it technically does now, but you know, it has for a long time.
Does now?
But,
okay, I was gonna say now's a great time to change it.
The thing is, it's still technically the same. It's still the same word.
Yeah.
It's just that the Chinese character has an indicator of male and female on it.
Okay.
So like I've advocated for a gender neutral pronoun since 8th grade. And the thing that I've always dreaded was that bad grammar was going to win this battle.
Yeah.
They, them, you know, like I was so against it. I was so against it when I was an 8th grader. I was like vehemently against this because we already have gender neutral pronouns. Right. And the one that I was a big fan of because it was the one I had heard of first, is thon. This is an image from the Merriam-Webster dictionary from 1934, and it stayed in the dictionary until 1961. And so it's the word thon. It says pronoun. So you have thon, and then possessive would be thons. Objective would be still thon. It is a proposed genderless pronoun of the third person. And so like you would say, instead of saying he will have his day, you would say thon will have thon's day. And that would go, and it also, instead of saying she will have her day, you would say thon will have thon's day.
Okay.
And I thought that was a great substitute, you know, because there was no point in gendering pronouns in the first place. And so I was all about that. But this ended up being dropped in 1961 because of the lack of the use of this pronoun.
Well, people don't like change.
I was all about reviving it for multiple reasons, but I do have to accept the fact that they might be a better path to move forward for two very important reasons. One, it's the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
People already say they.
Yeah,
you know, and it would be nearly impossible to get people to start saying thon. Also, turns out that they has been used as a gender neutral pronoun way longer than thon. So I have a quote from The Atlantic. Quote, likely the oldest gender neutral pronoun in the English language is the singular they, which was, for centuries, a common way to identify a person whose gender was indefinite. For a time in the 1600s, medical texts even referred to individuals who did not accord with the binary gender standards as they, them. The pronouns fortunes were reversed only in the 18th century when the notion that the singular they was grammatically incorrect and came into vogue among linguists. So, it wasn't until 1884 until a famous linguist publicly introduced thon as an alternative.
Okay.
And to be fair, according to the book, What's Your Pronoun? This was written by a professor at actually at U of I Champaign. So Champaign-Urbana. His name is Dennis Barron. And there have been 200 to 250 different gender neutral pronouns introduced since the 1780s.
Wow, talk about confusing.
Yeah, and this was because like we had gendered pronouns, you know, and we hadn't decided on one. And so everybody was like, well, how about this? How about that? The only one I can remember besides Don was O, you know? So like you'd say, O will have O's day, you know? It's like O was O
like
instead
the letter
of,
O?
Yeah, it was literally just
the
letter
letter
O.
O.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, we'll have O's Day.
yeah.
Okay.
But because gender is not always straightforward, and the fact that our language adheres to gender makes things murky and complicated in unnecessary ways.
Okay.
We don't have to pigeonhole everybody into he or she. But no. Science says there's two genders. But that's not been the case since the 1600s. The vehement insistence on having a dichotomous definition of gender is largely politically driven, and by people who heard boy girl in grade school and never branched out enough to learn more about gender beyond their surface level understanding of it. And the medical texts that I referred to earlier were in fact not even referring to gender. They were referring to sex when they were saying that there's no dichotomy here.
Okay.
So at this point, I do have to take a jab at some of the liberals who misunderstand the concept of sex and gender. I kind of touched on this earlier, but there was a very vocal left-wing person who shared a very popular left-wing article that was calling sex a social construct when it's fucking not. So I will read this quote from NPR. It says, quote, sex refers to a person's biological status and is typically assigned at birth, usually on the basis of external anatomy. Okay. Sex is typically categorized as male, female, or intersex. Gender is often defined as a social construct of norms, behaviors, and roles that varies between societies and over time. A person's sex literally refers to their biology. And just because it is not a social construct, that does not mean everybody automatically falls into male and female. And in fact, the previous quote uses the word intersex.
Okay.
But that NPR, they're a bunch of liberal cucks. I want to hear from an actual expert, all right? A real expert here, because like NPR, they have an agenda, you know.
Sure. Okay, so before you go to that, so the sex is male, female, and what was it?
Intersex.
Intersex. Okay, can you explain that a little bit more?
I will.
You're getting to that? Okay.
Yep.
All
Yeah,
right.
I will. I'll explain that.
All right.
Without even referring to gender, you could already say that there is intersex people who are born somewhere on a spectrum between male and female in terms of sex.
Right.
Because you have people who have a penis and a vagina, and sometimes people who have what are interior testicles. So like you have a vagina, but you also have interior testicles. So sex itself falls on kind of a spectrum here.
Yeah, there's options.
Yeah. But that came from NPR, and they're a bunch of liberal cucks.
Sure.
So I want to hear from an actual expert. For you, I have a quote from Arthur Arnold. He is a distinguished research professor of integrative biology and physiology. He's also a member of the Brain Research Institute. Some of his research interests include the forces that differentiate male and female tissues, sexual differentiation that underlies sex differences in behavior, physiology, and even the susceptibility to disease. Like there have been some studies that he's been a part of that involve if a person's sex affects their susceptibility to different diseases. So he is certainly somebody who is not unfamiliar with the biology of sex. So here's a quote from this man who is pretty much one of the most experts you're going to get on sex biology and behavior. Quote, The main problem with a strong dichotomy is that there are intermediate cases that push the limits and ask us to figure out exactly where the dividing line between males and females is. And that's often a very difficult problem because sex can be defined in a number of ways.
Okay.
So, even if you were to let go of the whole gender thing, even if you want to say that there's no social construct here, sex itself can be a fluid subject and often ambiguous and different depending on what culture you're in. You know, the people are going to be referring to it in all sorts of different ways. And to give somebody a mindset of it, and how a social construct works, when I say the word woman, we have a certain picture in our heads of what a woman is.
Sure.
But if I say lesbian woman, suddenly that picture changes. You know,
yeah.
and that's what a social construct is.
Okay.
We have some kind of application in our minds that makes assumptions about people before we know or meet them, based on a few different things. You know, if I say, "Hey, my friend's going to be coming over," first off, you'll probably expect it to be a dude.
Usually, yeah.
You'll picture somebody my age. You've come up with this construct of who this person is going to be, and then if I say, he's kind of like a country hick type of guy.
Okay.
Then suddenly your construct of that person changes, you know?
A little bit, yeah.
And our minds automatically do that. And it helps us save some time. And instead of, you know, like it helps us save some time and make some sort of expectations based on the constructs that we understand. And when we make those assumptions, we need to be ready for those assumptions to be subverted in some way, you know, because not everybody's going to fit into those categories.
Right.
But it can be helpful, you know, in terms of saving a little bit of time, you know. And we'd have those same things about men and women. So that's what the social construct is. Whereas with sex, it actually refers to the biological disposition, which is not a social construct. But that doesn't mean that just because sex is not a social construct, it doesn't mean that even in terms of biology, people just fit in this dichotomous category. Because even as this biologist expressed, there's no dividing line. You know,
Right.
Even in that case. So even sex itself can be somewhat of a fluid subject and often ambiguous. Accordingly, even if this meme, when it says gender, actually means sex, it's still inaccurate. I want to close with some words from Jaden Smith. Quote, I feel like people are kind of confused about gender norms. I feel like people don't really get it. I don't see man clothes and woman clothes. I just see scared people and comfortable people. It all comes from a concept of affecting the world in a positive way and leaving it better than it was the way we came. I think that means a lot. You know, I think that's a good quote. I like the place it's coming from, and Jaden understands that gender roles and assumptions about you based on your sex can do a lot of harm to people.
Yeah.
And when you can be a public figure who encourages humans to be who they are rather than who they're expected to be, that can do a tremendous amount of good. So, any thoughts?
So many thoughts.
I know. It's this one. Yeah, there was a lot to this one. And
Yeah.
I wanted to focus on the gender part rather than the climate change part because we have one episode and then a huge episode that are both based on climate change. So
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of big ones coming up on that already. So I kind of wanted to focus on the gender part because we haven't really talked a lot about gender yet.
No. Gender, I don't know. Gender's a thing that makes people uncomfortable, it seems like lately.
Yeah,
and it shouldn't.
It's
You know, just relax. Just accept people as the way they are.
Yeah.
Male, female, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
relax. Everybody relax.
Yeah, and that's another thing. It's like, why even bother with that being a concern of yours in the first place?
Yeah, it
you
shouldn't
know?
be.
Like,
It's not you.
not-
It's a different person. So just accept a person as who they are, and if
Yeah.
you can't do that, keep your mouth shut and walk away.
and maybe
you know?
go,
Just
maybe
don't worry
go,
about
maybe
it.
go the fuck away because,
Yeah.
and like honestly, I love the fact that there's a diversity of people
Yeah.
out there, and it makes the world so much more interesting. And
Well, I mean, there's what 8 billion people on the planet now.
yeah,
We can't just be male and female.
Yeah,
That's
to
way
imagine-
too black and white. That's not gonna
yeah,
happen.
to imagine
There are so many different people out there.
to imagine everybody's going to fit neatly into these categories is ignorant. You know,
Yeah, it really is.
It's just not gonna happen. And what drives me nuts is that they want to say science, 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 and it's like you haven't taken the time to understand the science.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, maybe you've got one sex versus another sex, but even that's not, 1 and 2. I mean, there's other options in between.
Yeah,
But still, just, it's your attitude,
mhm.
the way you act in life is a big difference.
Yeah,
There's a lot of options out there. Just don't worry about it.
It's
If it's not you, don't worry about it.
yeah, and if you can't stand it, go the fuck away.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not.
Go hang out with your bros in the bar and do your man things or,
Yeah,
or
and
whatever.
and go
just
go
don't
ahead,
worry about
and bitch about Malcolm Moore. Like whatever you want to do. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't give a fuck. Go
Yeah.
away.
Just
It's
don't worry about it. We all just need to accept everybody for who they are, no matter what they are.
Yeah,
Who or what they are,
absolutely.
yeah.
Like, if they're not hurting other people, I don't
Yeah.
understand what the problem is. And
yeah, I
that's,
don't either. It's
That's something that drives me absolutely nuts.
it really is. Yeah.
But anyway, thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Meaningless Podcast because sometimes memes are meaningless. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.